Hi everyone. So in this video, we will continue covering different performance metrics. Things continue getting complicated. For instance, we have seen in the previous videos purchase transactions, sale transactions, partial sale transactions, different shares, and now we have different measures to account for those different types of activities in a fund. But now we are also seeing that we may have contributions and withdrawals. So that is a game changer. And it is a game changer because look at this example, this ledger. We are starting with 10 million. We go all the way up to 10.7 million. But there is a net cash flow of 500,000. I mean, 1 million contribution paid into this fund by a client. And then you have a withdrawal, which is 500,000. But the net effect is we have 500,000 that are not the result of returns, performance. This is the result of somebody who paid money to the fund. Okay, so the way in which we can handle or control this is original Dietz method, which is also known as BAI, coming from Bank Administration Institute. So the way in which it works is number one, let's get the net cash flow. So you're going to look at everything in this ledger that is not buy and sell or trading activity per se, but it's more contributions or withdrawals. So you have that contribution and you have a withdrawal here. Everything else is trading transactions. So we add those two and we end up with a net cash inflow of 500K. Now, what we're going to do is let's look at the expanded the formula of the return that we can estimate based on these transactions. If we simply look at the ending value, and I have given this a name, we subtract the beginning value and we divide by the beginning value, then that is simply giving us in the numerator how much was the capital gain or how much is the profits. And in the denominator, we are dividing by our beginning value, which is also, we can consider it as our initial investment. And there we go. Now, as is, this formula would consider this 500,000 as returns or performance. So we have to eliminate that. So we just subtract it here in the numerator. That's it. Okay, the net cash flow, we are subtracting it. And then that's it. It means that now we are having ending value minus beginning value minus the cash flow that was deposited into the fund. That leaves us only, once we have subtracted beginning value, ending value, and net cash flow, the only thing left is how much is the capital gain or how much are the profits. We divide that by beginning value. But there is a problem here. When we divide by beginning value, we're dividing by 10 million. So we are assuming that we only invested 10 million. And then those 500K are also, we should consider that as an investment that was made because at some point the fund received those 500K. Those 500K were deposited, were invested, and those 500K are contributing for part of a performance or the returns of the fund. So what the Dietz, original Dietz method is doing is we take a beginning value and we assume that that net cash flow occurred mid-period. So a way of doing so is, or their way of doing so is adding the net cash flow in the denominator. It's like, hey, wait, our investment is not only 10 million, our investment is 10.5 million. But then we're going to weight this, by dividing it by 2. So now that is equivalent, that is their approach to essentially assume that that net cash flow was received mid-period, in the middle of the period. And there we go, we have 2.2678%. That's the original Dietz method, but there is a flaw or criticism here which is that, okay, what if this 1 million or the entire net cash flow occurred on May 2nd? Then it's not in the beginning, it's only it's a single day after. But then this formula is going to consider that the 500K came into the fund still in by mid-May, which would be incorrect. Or what if these cash flows are received the day before the cutoff date or the end of the month? Then these funds have been there only for a day. Should we still even add them at all here in the denominator? So that's where the modified Dietz plays an important role and is more and more used. So what we are going to do is explicitly, we're going to calculate each one of the cash flows, okay, one by one. So a cash flow one is 1 million. Cash flow two is a withdrawal of 500,000. And now we're going to give these funds a weight based on how long inside the investment horizon these funds were part of the fund. And the way in which we do it is first, we take the overall period of our list of transactions. So we are reporting on a monthly basis. We have a single month. So we will take the last day of the period minus the first day of the period, and then that's it. So we have 30 days. Keep something in mind. This is by subtracting dates in Excel. And this is a comment I received. Actually, it's quite helpful to keep in mind. If we only do this, we're assuming that there are no trades on May 1st or on May 31st, one of the two. It's excluding either the first day or the last day. So it would be more precise to do this plus one, so we're not missing that day. One way or the other, if you ignore that or not, that's not a big game changer. It's a single day, but it's more precise. Unless you're working with a 30-360 convention, which is many times used in banking, in which each one of your months, you're going to assume it has 30 days. Okay, but here I'm using actual number of days. Now, the day of the number of days, the first cash flow was into the fund. So what we are going to do is, let's take this. This is cash flow one. It was received on May 10th. I just put that date right here for convenience. And now let's subtract that date from the first day here, and same grounds, we add one. Okay, so we have 10 days. Cash flow one, in other words, was received 10 days after the fund was started. Now, what about D2? So D2 is the number of days in which the cash flow 2 was received. So I'm going to do the same. So May 24th, I have the date right here in which this cash flow was received. We also have it up here, minus the first day, and then plus one to keep the same logic. Now, these are the dates in which the number of days into the period in which you receive the cash flow. Now, what we are more concerned, or what we really care about is, okay, after cash flow one was received into the fund, that was 10 days after the cutoff date, after 10 days after May started. Okay, how many days did we have cash flow one in hand until from that point until the end of the period? And that's where the weights come in. So we will do, okay, give me the overall number of days minus the day in which cash flow one was received. So before day 10, we didn't have cash flow one. So we have cash flow one was in the fund for, let's turn it to decimal, and then I'll 21 days. Okay, and then let's divide that by the overall window to get that as a percentage. Let's take it back to as a percentage, and then it's 68%. What about cash flow 2? Well, cash flow 2, we have the overall days, 31 days, minus the number of days, or the number of days into the fund when cash flow 2 was received, and then that is giving us, I'll do the same if we change this here. Cash flow 2 is less relevant because cash flow 2, that withdrawal happened only 7 days away before the end of May. But we want to convert that into a weight, so we divide that by the 31 days, and then we turn it into a percentage. So in other words, we had weight 2 for 23% of that 31-day window, much less than weight 1. So weight 1 it was more impactful when it comes to influencing our performance, and weight 2 was less impactful. If let's assume the cash flow 2 had been received on day 30, then the weight would go down to 3%, which is that doesn't affect at all our we should not care about it at all because it was only a single day. Okay, let me take it back, Control C, to the 23%. So now the modified Dietz, once we have this, right, what we are going to do is, well, we can add the cash flows for completeness, so that's 500K, but most importantly, we're going to weight each cash flow by how long they were in the fund. So it's cash flow 1, weight of cash flow 1 times cash flow 1, weight of cash flow 2 times cash flow 2. And now we sum the weighted cash flows. So we are not only adding them, but we are weighting them by how much of the investment window of the investment horizon we had those funds in these cash flows in the fund. And now we get finally the modified Dietz formula, which is, well, we have the beginning value, and let's make a parenthesis. I named it ending value minus beginning value. If we scroll up, this is ending value, beginning value, right? And then minus the cash flow. So in the numerator, we are making sure that we are not including those 500K in the numerator, because those 500K are not at all, the 500K on their own are not performance. They are not coming from returns. Now, however, they generated returns, okay? Those we're not subtracting. So those 500K became maybe 525,000. So we are not eliminating those 25,000 that were generated as a result of having those 500K. That is still captured by this ending value minus beginning value. But we are subtracting the 500K because the 500K, it was somebody paying it in. And finally, we divide by the initial value, the beginning value, and then plus the sum of the weighted cash flows. So that is going to, you have the formulas nicely displayed here, and then the sum of the weighted cash flows. So instead of adding the net cash flow, now we are giving less weight to cash flows that were in the fund for a reduced portion of that time, and we're giving more weight to those that were in the fund for a wider for a part of this horizon. And now, so if you compare this formula, ending value minus beginning value, and we eliminate the sum of the cash flows, the net cash flow, and then we divide that by beginning value plus the sum of the weighted cash flows, and that's a modified Dietz. So it's a more conservative than the original Dietz. So the performance comes down from 2.2678 to 2.2. Okay, now there is another MIRR, which is not identical, but it's a little bit different from the modified internal rate of return that we saw in capital budgeting. So I'm gonna set this R. So the way in which it works is the following. We have an initial value, which is the beginning value. We can list it here. We have cash flow 1. We can list it here. We have the weight of cash flow 1, which is gotten exactly in the same way as the modified Dietz. We have cash flow 2. We can take it either from here, or we can take it from here, up here. Okay, and then we have the weight of cash flow 2, which we can take from modified Dietz. Okay, and now at this point, let's continue and calculate the weighted values or the future values for each one of these investments. So the way in which we're thinking of, let me change this 2.197 to anything. Let's say 1.5%, just so that we can actually see this working. So what we are doing here is we have, and now the WT, we can think about it as 100%. That is going to be the total or a cash flow, the weight of a cash flow that was in the fund the entire window, so 100%. Now let's look at this. What is the future? I invested 10 million. That is the beginning value. So this particular cash flow is in the fund the entire window. So what I'm going to do is simply 10 million multiplied by 1 plus this hypothetical rate. This is just an initial seed to the power of 100. That is 100% is going to be to the power of 1. So it's going to be 10 million times 1.5%. That's it. Okay, 10 point, not surprisingly, 10 point. Okay, so keep in mind the 100% as the exponent here, it's exactly the same as this times 1.015. That's all we're doing. We're just doing it in a fancier way. So we are raising to the power of 1. That makes no difference. Okay, now what about cash flow 1? So cash flow 1 was deposited in the fund. Okay, but I only had 67.74% left of the horizon. So I'm going to compound it based on this rate of return, which is hypothetical, but I'm going to raise it to the power of t, but t is no longer 1. In this case, it's less than 100%, it's less than 1, it's 0.6774. So it is going to raise to the power of, it's going to raise the annual rate, 1.5% is an annual rate, or a periodic rate, right? In this case, this is, I believe, a month, so this is a periodic rate. So we are raising it to the power of, hey, only 67.74% of that month, not the entire month. And there we go. Now cash flow 2, which is negative, by the way, is the same. I'm going to take it to future value by multiplying by 1 plus the overall rate, not in this case, it's monthly, to the power of how much, or this is the 1.5% is the return of the overall, the entire window, but cash flow 2 was only there for 22.58%. So 0.2258. So I raise it to the power of 0.2258 instead of to the power of 1 or instead of to the power of 0.6774. So I'm saying that this overall window horizon rate, periodic rate, it's only, we're going to compound it, but by only 22% of that period. And then there we go. So it grows, but it's not that much. Okay. And then finally, what is the total future value of these three cash flows? Okay, so I have 10,658 for 453.07. Okay, and in that case, now what I have to do, or what I would like to do, is this future value it has to match in total. So I have 3, the initial value, what I had in the fund, 1 million was deposited in the fund, 500,000 was withdrawn from the fund. So then the sum of these three future values, it has to be equal to the 10,732,450. So then what I will do is simply go to data, what if analysis, goal seek. And using goal seek, which is really simple, I'm going to say, okay, I want to set this cell, the future value. It has to be equal to, and I have to type this value. I cannot select it from here. So I'm going to type it is 10,732,450 by changing this rate, because clearly it is not 1.5. If the R would have been 1.5, had been 1.5%, then the ending value would have been 10,658,000, but we're getting more than that. So we run goal seek, and goal seek finds a solution which is 2.201. It means the 10 million grew and the entire window to 10.2 million. The 1 million grew only 0.667 or 67% of that window to 1.014 million. And then the 500,000, it's negative, so it has a cost of opportunity of 502,463.64. The addition of these three future values is giving me now the ending value, and now that is how we get MIRR in these specific cases. Okay, so we have covered three methods: the original Dietz formula, but that assumes that any cash flow occurs mid-period, which may not be accurate, so it's the least conservative one. Then we have the modified Dietz, which is more precise, and now it gives each one of the cash flows a weight based on the number of days in which each one was received. And then we have the modified internal rate of return, and that, once again, this is not exactly, it's the same framework, but it's not exactly the same as the MIRR we have seen in capital budgeting, but it's quite similar, and it leads us to an even more precise value, which is in this case is 2.201. I hope this was helpful, and let me know if you have any doubts or questions. Thanks for your attention. Let's keep in touch.